Hey guys, another video for our How to Do Stuff in Japan playlist and our mini-series on raising children in Japan. But this might be sort of mild interest to other people as well, just because it's some classic examples of Japanese culture and Japanese life and just generally how things are in Japan. So today's topic is kids' school finishing times. So there's some other related parts to it as well, but specifically kids' finishing times. So in a lot of other countries, usually school finishing times are fairly rigid, aren't they? They're fairly set so that parents can be organised as to how they get their kids home and make sure they are home. And these days where lots of both parents are working, you know, they need to be able to be organised and have sort of a routine where it's fairly predictable and routine. However, in Japan it's not like that, naturally enough. Usually there is a finishing time for school, that's a usual finishing time for school, but it will be varied all over the place. So one example first of all is finishing early just randomly, and that will happen, that for some random reason the teacher will let the kids go home 10 minutes early, and it might be all the kids, or it just might be one class, or it might be one group, or it might be just random. They've finished doing what they're doing and the teacher says, oh, you can go home now, and the kids just go home. And we're actually talking about, this can be elementary school or junior high school or high school, but specifically we're talking about elementary school. So kids as young as 6, and those of you who are parents will know that a kid finishing school 10 minutes early can be a real problem, because if you've organised to collect them and you meet them where you normally meet them, or to be where you normally are, and they finish 10 minutes early, and recently we had this where I turned up and at the usual place and waited a while and nobody came, and then some other kids came and said, oh, you know, your kid's already gone ages ago. What? Where? Gone where? Right? You can imagine. And in a lot of countries it wouldn't happen because of the liability issues, right? I mean, those of you, lots of us can remember being at school and the teacher watching the clock slowly ticking up to, you know, to whatever finishing time was, because you weren't allowed to leave a minute earlier, you know, and you know, remember teachers saying put your head on the desk and have a sleep, or, you know, read a book or something and just kill the time, play some games or do something, do anything really until the finishing time is reached, on the money, ding ding ding, the bell goes, all right, now you can go. And it's a liability issue, isn't it? Because if they let you go early and you went off and got hit by a car or a bus, or you missed meeting your parents and something else happened, that you know, the school would be liable. And in Japan it's the case too, of course, that, you know, if for some reason they did let them go early and for some reason there was some catastrophe, they would be liable. But there isn't the culture of being sued in Japan, which is sort of a good thing. But the downside is that they don't worry about stuff like that so much, or they don't think about it. They just don't think about that, the liability issues. They don't think about it so much. In a lot of countries the liability issues are a big issue and people think about it all the time, but in Japan liability isn't something that they seem to give a lot of thought to, you know, and they'll just let the kids go home early. And it's really frustrating. It really is frustrating. So that happens randomly, just randomly. The teacher lets them go 5 minutes early or 10 minutes early or something. And then you get these other times where we had this week where it's parent-teacher week. So the parents go and talk to the teachers. Now, you guys would have that in your countries too, and you'd remember, either as a student or a parent, you'd remember how that works. You know, the parents go up and meet the teachers. So this week was parent-teacher week. So the kids, 3 days this week, the kids are finishing at 1:20 in the afternoon. Now, that means that in families where both parents work, someone's got to come home 3 days, someone's got to come home early to be there when the kids come home at 1:20. But it also means that the other parent, someone's got to go to the parent-teacher meeting thing, right? So you end up with both parents have to be available to go and do this parent-teacher thing, and one of the parents has to be available 3 days earlier, 2 hours earlier than usual, to meet the kid. And then we found that 120 that we were told is fairly random as well. So that's another example of it. Now, of course, you can easily think of better ways of doing it, can't you? So, for example, let's have half the teachers meet the parents this week, and the other half meet the parents next week, and that way the teachers who aren't meeting parents can look after the kids, so the kids can finish at their normal 3 o'clock finishing time, can't they? There's one solution that we can think of right off the top of our heads, can't we? However, what happens is these things are the way it's done. So at some stage in history, some stage years ago, someone in authority decided that this was the way it would be done, and since then that's the way it's done every year, and no one questions it, nobody complains, the parents don't complain about these systems, and the teachers don't complain, and nobody complains, and everybody just accepts it the way it is. And there's confusion with all these things. There's another one that happens where if they have some activity on a Saturday, often they'll give the kids Monday off, which means that one parent they have to do something with the kids. They have to find some solution to looking after the kids, don't they, on that Monday that there's no school. And it's just the way it's always done. And because it's the way it's always done, and because in Japanese culture there's a whole heap of levels to this. One is that that's the way it's always been done, so that's the way it's done. And nobody wants to stand up and say, I think there's a better way, because if you do that, we've talked about this on lots of videos before, in some cultures, coming up with a better way is admired, wow, he came up with a good idea. In Japanese culture, if you come up with another way of doing it, you're suggesting that you're smarter than everybody else, and that you think that you've got a better idea. Now, I've actually been told this in the past, came up with an idea and suggested it, and someone said, you really think you're smarter than everybody else, don't you? Family member said that, Japanese family member. And that's the way they see it. If there's a system, no matter how stupid the system is, if you come up with your suggestion of how it should be done, they'll say, they might not say it, but they'll think it. Oh, this guy thinks he's smarter than everybody else, And us being foreigners, of course, that adds another layer to it as well. I mean, they'd think the same thing if a Japanese person said it, but it's sort of a little bit worse when you're a foreigner, because, the foreigners come along and he's telling us how we should do this thing that we've always done this way, And if you try and gently talk to people about it, and because you hear parents getting frustrated because they change this so regularly, and often they'll change things at the last minute, and you'll hear parents say, oh, geez, we don't know what we're going to do on Thursday because, we've got to work, and you can see them stressing out about it, but they're very careful not to complain about it or to say that, there should be a better way or anything like that. And this isn't just for parents with kids who are going to live with this. This is life in Japan in general. That quite often, in particularly group scenarios, so the dojo is another example of this, is that instead of having the same session in the dojo every week, there's sort of a session in the dojo every week at about the same time, but then it often varies. It'll often start 30 minutes earlier or 30 minutes later, or instead of the Saturday it'll be on the Sunday, or it'll be 2 hours later than usual, or randomly changes. And it's sort of like we made a video before about hardship and difficulties, and about how sort of Japanese people sort of accept hardship and difficulties, sort of almost embrace them. But if things are difficult and hard, then it's we'll just gambare, we'll try harder. And sort of complicated stuff, unnecessarily complicated stuff, is sort of embraced here as well, where there's a lot of stuff that, like the school thing, the finishing time thing, there'd be a lot simpler ways to solve the problem, but they're forever things are overcomplicated unnecessarily, and it'd be so much easier, instead of constantly changing the school finishing time, it'd be so much easier to come up with other solutions that would achieve better results and not be so complicated and not upset so many people's lives, so many routines. Because you can just imagine if a whole school finishes 2 hours early, how many parents across the board are affected by that, you know, and for 3 days, you know, just ridiculous. And again, it's really good that we live in a culture where people don't sue, you know, as much. It happens, but it's really rare. And it's really good that we live in a culture where people don't complain. That's nice as well. But this is the downside, that quite often you get ridiculous situations that are just perpetuated year after year after year, and nobody does anything about it. Nobody thinks of doing anything about it, because that's the way it's done, that's the way we do it, and that's the way we'll always do it, and no one questions it. So for those people who happen to be parents who'll be raising kids in Japan, you know, don't even try. You know, we've talked about this with the walking the kids to school thing. You know, don't even try to change anything. You can sort of adjust what you do a little bit and sort of come to some sort of arrangement that you're comfortable with, but don't mention, you're better off not mentioning to anybody that surely there's a better way, you know, surely this isn't the best way to do it, surely you're better off just not saying anything like that, because nobody, you know, if anyone agrees with you, they're only agreeing with you to be polite, and you're just seen as rocking the boat, and no one wants to know about it. No one's going to run with it, even when they pretend that they will. You get this sometimes where people will sort of, oh, geez, really? Oh, it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, taihen desu ne, so desu ne. And they'll all sort of agree that it's no good, and then they just move on. They're very careful not to complain. They're just saying, oh, isn't it difficult? Oh, well, shogunai, can't be helped. Let's just keep going. And of course, you know, in the back of your mind, you're thinking it can be helped. You know, I can think of a couple of better ways of doing that, but no, as far as they're concerned, no, it's shogunai. And because see, again, all these things come down from the top. So whatever this crazy idea is has come from somebody at the top, and nobody's going to question that. Everybody's just going to go along with it. That's the way it's always done. And quite often you'll find that a lot of the schools will do the same thing. You know, our neighbours got high school kids, and they'll have the same thing where, what are you doing home? Oh, you know, today's some day, different day, so we come home early today, or, you know, we've got the day off, or, you know, randomly, and the kids will be home on their own. And see, there's another layer as well. Japanese people will proudly tell you, we made that video about the walking to school, and one Japanese guy came along and said, oh, it's great. Oh no, it was the one about all the phone zombies in the park. And one Japanese guy said, oh, isn't it great that kids in Japan can play in the park safely without their parents watching them, right? That's the Japanese spin on it. Everyone else is saying, you know, geez, those kids trying to get their parents' attention and their parents aren't interested, you know. The Japanese guy comes along and says, isn't it great that Japanese kids are so safe in the park that their parents don't even have to look at them, you know? And there's a bit of that as well, that they proudly tell you how independent. There was a thing here recently in the media about how independent Japanese kids are, and we talked about this on another video, and in some countries it would be considered neglect. And because this is the thing, some parents are worried when the kids are finishing early, and oh, how are we going to get the kids, and how are we going to look after them, and who's going to be at home to take care of them. And some parents, some Japanese parents worry about that, but a lot of them don't. They just let the kids work it out. They let the kids go home on their own, and they let the kids let themselves in the house. And, well, you know, 6-year-old kids, 7-year-old kids, 8-year-old kids letting themselves into the house and just home on their own until their parents come home. You know, which, you know, some countries that'd be considered negligent, wouldn't it? Child negligence, right? Leaving young kids that age at home unsupervised and you know, no one there to look after them. And of course, it's mayhem because, you know, the system with the roads and everything, with the old guys, you know, for some reason they've got the lady, the crossing guard lady in the morning holding the flag up, and in the afternoon, as we've talked about before, you've just got the occasional old guy in his, you know, shiny vest and hat standing on a street corner randomly. But when they change the times like that, there's usually nobody. And it's just chaos, you know. You drive down the street at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and there's little kids wandering all over the place, running down the street, running down the footpath and chasing each other across the road and riding their bikes around not being looked at. And it's just, you know, when you are aware of potential dangers, it's just a scary thing to see, you know. So again, to those parents, those people who will be raising kids in Japan, and you know, this is one of the things that you're going to have to work around. You know, you just got to be flexible and on the ball, and quite often they won't tell you, so you know, you've got to get there early and be attentive to what's going on. If they finished early today, what's happening, and just accept it. It's just the way it is. And if you're here, if you don't have kids and you happen to be in Japan, you're part of groups, you just got to accept this stuff all the time. It's sort of like the organisers of the principal of the school and the organiser of the dojo and the guys the old guys, usually old guys, right? Japan's run by old guys. Groups of old guys run Japan. There's the occasional lady who's managed to get herself in a senior position in Japan, but predominantly it's old men running Japan, and the old guys at the top always sort of like it complicated, because usually their systems and their ways of doing things are so complicated. And you know, we've talked about before, a lot of people in Japan constantly saying yoko karanai, I don't really know, you know. And you'll ask other parents sometimes, what's happening this week with the finishing times? Oh, yoko karanai, I don't really know. And you live in this state of I don't really know, and it's fairly constant, and Japanese people really accept that. In a lot of countries, people will be saying, look, I want to know what's happening with the kids, what time do they finish? But in Japan, they're very patient, and they're used to being in a state of yoko wakaranai, don't really know. They're used to it. It's normal here. When you're a part of a group or any sort of group, you just accept that you don't really know what's happening. And the guys at the top, they know what's going on. You know, they know what's going on, or you think they know what's going on, or they think they know what's going on, or something. And everybody's sort of comfortable with that. You know, the people that organise these things, they're comfortable making it complicated. It sort of guarantees their position, really, because it's so complicated that, you know, they're the only people, that group of old guys are the only people that really know what's happening, and everybody turns to them and says what's happening, you know. Oh, and usually they tell you at the last moment. That's another amazing thing in Japanese culture, is quite often they'll tell you at the last minute. You know, I had to do a radio examination, aviation law exam at Tokyo University a few years ago, and I needed to book a hotel in Tokyo, so I sent them an email and said, can you tell me where this examination's going to be? And we didn't know it was going to be at Tokyo University. It was going to be in Tokyo, that's what they said. And I contacted them and said, can you tell us where this examination's going to be, because I need to book a hotel? No, we can't tell you yet. Can't tell you yet where it's going to be. And this was like a week before the examination. Can't tell you yet where it's going to be. Oh, righto. So just had to book a hotel not knowing where this thing would be, and then the day before or 2 days before the exam, they sent out emails to everybody that was going to be taking the exam and said it's going to be at Tokyo University's law campus, law area, you know, law department. Right at the last minute. And that's really common here too. Really common is that you'll get yoko wakaranai, maru wakaranai, don't know yet, maru wakaranai, and then right at the last moment, some old guy makes a decision and tells everybody, right, this is what we're going to do. And then everybody goes, hi. So you can see there's layer after layer of Japanese culture and Japanese way of doing things, layer after layer, that is the results in this happening, where there's systems and ways of doing things that are just way more complicated than they need to be, and way too difficult, more difficult than they need to be, and often risky. You know, the kids, this is the big issue for parents, because it's a kid's safety thing. Nothing more frustrating than trying to look after your kids and turning up to pick them up, and you know, your kid's already left ages ago. Well, okay, where? Oh, don't know. Yoko wakaranai. Really, that was the answer to that question. Where's the kid? Yoko wa karanai, don't really know. And you know, and this is often the case in stuff in Japan too, is quite often these things you just laugh them off. When you get the Yoko wa karanai thing, Yoko wa karanai, you can just laugh it off because, you know, we get it all the time. Yeah, Yoko wa karanai, yeah, right, yeah. You know, and it's sort of, aha, it's funny. And the silly things, you know, aha, yeah, it's pretty silly. I can think of 10 different ways of doing it better than that, but okay, I'll do it the silly way. And quite often these things you just laugh and go along with it, you know. But now and again, you know, when it's about the safety of your kids, or when it's something that really affects you close to the heart like that, where it's something that's really important to you, it can be really difficult. It can be really, really difficult and really, really frustrating. And again, you've just got to deal with it yourself. You can't complain about it. That's the last thing you can do. You know, complaining is just never works here. You can't do anything that's going to rock the boat. You just have to try and find solutions within yourself. So, you know, the solutions to these problems are, okay, turn up way early to collect the kids every day, or meet the kids wherever you're going to meet the kids, because there's a chance they'll be let out early. You know, be on your guard that, you know, if you see other kids walking the street at a different time, you know, if you know the kids, ask them what's going on. You know, try and stay on top of it with the newsletters and stuff from school. I mean, often they won't tell you, occasionally they will. You just have to stay on top of it and make sure, you know, that you keep yourself as well informed as you can. And of course with the kids too, you know, have your plans in place. Look, you know, if you get sent home early and we're not here, do this. Or, you know, if you're sent home early and we're not where we normally are, you know, do this or do that. Or it's all you can do. It's life in general in Japan. You can only sort of have any sort of influence on yourself and your immediate surroundings, like your kids and stuff, that you can have influence over that to a certain extent. A lot of stuff you can't. There's a lot of shogunai stuff. There is a lot of it can't be helped stuff that you just have to go along with. And sometimes it's hard, and sometimes you don't like it. And a lot of compromising. Life in Japan for a person who's not Japanese is one big compromise. You know, every day you got to compromise on stuff, because it's just life in Japan. You know, it's just what it is. You know, we have to gaman suru. We have to endure and be patient and endure whatever's happening, and, you know, compromise and be patient and stuff. So again, the idea of these videos, mildly interesting to people interested in Japanese life perhaps, and then as far as the how to do stuff in Japan list, it's a heads up thing, so people who come here aren't taken totally off guard by this stuff, that they're a bit aware of it before they come, in the hope that it'll help them deal with it a bit better. Because when you know about this stuff, when it happens, it's still hard to deal with, but when you're aware of it already, it makes it a bit easier. At first, if you don't know about this stuff, it takes you totally off guard. It can be really upsetting, and you can react badly. That's the other problem. It's how you react to this stuff is really, really important. Bitching to the other parents is a bad idea. Bitching to the school is a bad idea. Bitching to anybody is a bad idea. Even your partner, if your partner's Japanese, best not to. So you just got to come up with good solutions and good compromises and make the best of it. Do what you can. Anyway, there it was. More videos coming soon.